We now.
Since the last meeting with the group, and it was kind of a tall order, but department heads have sent us some ideas as to how to reduce costs, so we've plugged those in, and there's some other assumptions that we have to discuss also that will help us balance. Some of that's discretionary, so that'll be part of the discussion. So take it away, maybe run through some of the reductions and cuts that we've proposed.
Okay, well, you can see that we're at 4.175 million at the end of 2022. So we're not quite at our goal, but we have made significant progress with the department heads' help. Before you have listed the CIP projects that they are suggesting delaying, or the reserves, which would take cuts in funding this in 22. And then you have a long list of MRF reductions. Some of those are postponements. Some of those are not replacing equipment, maybe using other departments' equipment. And then others still are using cash balances that they were carrying forward. So you'll see all of those techniques used. And then you have a long list of department operating cuts. I didn't list them line item by line item. I just listed the department and the year that they cut. So you can see that everybody dug deep to do what they could there. Not every department could cut the 10% we asked. My department, for example, has people and the audit, and we have to do the audit, or the state will be upset with us. So the departments that could did what they could, and others did as well as they could. We also did some other items to help get to that balance as well. Risk management for our property insurance. Risk management pays the insurance bills and replaces equipment that has insurance claims on it. And then we bill that out to the departments. So we reduced what we charge to the departments for this year by $51,000. We increased some of the vacancy based on trends for both 21 and for 22. Street projects that they'll at least have 2 vacancies there that they probably won't be able to fulfill. So we have $100,000 for that for 22. We also, I increased the mill levy to keep it flat. So that gave us $211,000. That line item is switched with the central garage revenue increase. So I apologize for that. The other thing we did is we had the health and dental fund absorb the health insurance premium increases. This will use the health and dental fund reserve balance and will lower that balance by about $300,000. Looking at where that fund balance will be at the end of 22, I think we'll still be in good shape. We would probably have about 2.3 million in that fund, and high 1.8 million or so is where we would need to be. That would be our insurance recommended number. So we'd still be fine with our health and dental insurance. We'd still be fine with our risk management fund balance for 22 at least. It's not something we could continue to do forever. But I think the health and dental fund did not or is not projected to decrease the balance as we thought, as we projected. So I think the health and dental fund will have more in the reserves at the end of 21 than projected, which will help us, and we could do that in 22. So with that, that's how we got to the 4.175. So our discussion from here is, where do we want to go? where do we look for more cuts? I think the department heads and myself have looked at everything that we can without reducing service levels too drastically.
Mhm. And what did you do with the mill levy?
We maintained it. What I had originally projected on our meeting before was using the revenue neutral rate. So we're maintaining our mill levy. We're not increasing or decreasing, just maintaining.
Angela, I had a question about some of the CIP reserve cuts. Specifically sidewalks. I know I've brought this up for like 8 years in a row, so it's probably going to fall on deaf ears. But I know that that was one of the recommendations of the Housing Commission, that we do have a sidewalk pool for grants to homeowners to assist with repairs, at least in featured neighborhoods. And now I see that not only do we not have that increase, but we don't have like anything. I just want some conversation around that. I know that that seems to be a priority amongst our constituents, because I do receive calls about sidewalks, and a lot of people don't recognize that it's their responsibility to repair them. So I just didn't know where everyone stood on that particular item, and there were some other items brought up, I know, in Housing Commission discussions surrounding revolving loan funds, et cetera. And I know we're probably supposed to be talking about where else to cut, but I want to make sure that when we're discussing these budgetary priorities, or where we want to be, that we're keeping in mind our goals and the priorities that we've established over the years to furthering some of these, long-term challenges such as housing.
Well, suppose you're talking to the rest of us.
Yeah.
In a long way, right?
Well, I don't really know where to start. I'm just throwing something out there. Instead of here's where we should cut more, I'm saying, well, I think we're cutting a little bit too much off of items that have been a priority and need to have continued focus.
Perhaps we could start with, as we typically end up focusing on the general fund ending balance. And we arbitrarily picked a number of $5 million arbitrarily last time we met. And we bandied that around from 4.8 to 5.2, and we ended up, I think, at $5 million. And you guys have done a terrific job, and it's a painful process, believe me. And you're now projecting a 4.175 ending balance. And I'm wondering what our thoughts would be is that we could slightly modify that, coming off of the $5 million, and modify that for a targeted ending balance of 2022 of $4.5 million. If we look at our ending balances over the last 4 years, 2019 we had a $5.5 million balance. 2020 we had a $7.2 million balance. The budgeted for 2021 was $3.9 million. That was just a year ago, $3.9 million. Our 2021 revised is certainly a good number of $7.16 million. So, and you're showing 4.15. So, perhaps to soften this impact of all of these budget cuts, what would your thoughts be at a comfort level of 4.5 million?
Well, I feel if we have budgeted here 4.175, we'll probably end up closer to 4.5 at the end.
Because we
Right.
won't spend.
Because typically not every department spends all their budget. So that would be typical.
I'd like to see, at least in the budget document, rather than the 4.175, I'd like to accelerate that about $325,000 to 4.5.
Yeah.
As a point of discussion.
And I get what you're saying as well. I don't think we need to go as hard as getting that ending as at 5 because I think of our conservative estimates. If we did go to 4.5, we probably would get up to that 4.8,
Yeah.
4.9. Anybody else's thoughts on that?
I don't have no problem going 4.5.
Well,
I don't
that's gonna
either.
mean identifying additional cuts, and I will
Yeah, we
note
still got that to deal with.
that there's $500,000 in vacancies included in these cuts, including 2 street positions, which every single person on the council unanimously cited as a priority, is our street maintenance program. And so we would be doubling down on that effort to not fill those positions, even though it's a priority of our community to have good streets. So I think we're gonna struggle to hit that 4.5. I get it though, John. I mean, that's a kind of a shocking dip from 7.1 to 4.1 in 1 year. And if you continue on that trajectory, it doesn't look great for 2023.
Yeah, I'm worried about 2023 as well.
In Angela's first budget document dated June 15th, she had identified an average merit increase of 3% is included. Is that still included at 3%?
That is still included.
Yeah. So that would be a point of discussion. And I think we probably need to discuss that as to what our comfort level is, whether it's 3% or
Or
something
2.5,
slightly less than that, 2.5.
yeah, 2.5,
I don't know
what that does
what that
numerically,
does. Is
yeah.
it 300,000, 275 to 300?
Are you saying going from 3% to 2.5?
I'm
Mhm.
saying 2.5.
Do we
I would
have to,
look,
do we have to have
honestly.
the 3 to build the ranges, to accommodate the range, Tom?
I don't know if Tom has input.
I mean, is that why we set it at 3?
No, it's not really driven by the matrix itself. So
Okay.
whatever the budget is, we build a matrix around that.
Okay,
Yeah.
So,
okay,
That
so
makes
you
sense.
could absorb it. The question for you, because I know the health insurance is obviously projected to go up. Are you thinking about possibly looking next year at doing a study and looking at different companies to find lower rates, or?
You know, our rates, what our consultants are telling us and what I'm reading in the literature is
Uh-huh.
that what's really driving costs is medical inflation, and that's going to be
That's going to be regardless.
That's going to be regardless.
Okay.
Yeah, that and stop loss insurance.
Okay.
Those are the two big drivers. So, yeah.
And we currently pay, what, a single?
It's 90% of a single on our kind of our core plan, and
Okay.
then it's 80% on let's see, employee and spouse, and then 70% on full family.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And I will say, we are looking
Could get
at,
those
our
numbers.
consultants, I think, are doing a really great job of looking at ways that we can maybe bring some of our costs down, just in the way we do some things, and still very preliminarily involved in that, but it's one of those things, it'll definitely be a paradigm shift on some things, but they are gonna throw out some options for us to consider, so, we're gonna be talking some more probably by the end of the month, so,
Okay.
but hopefully maybe that's something we can kind of start bending our cost curve down. And you might remember, probably about 3 years ago, we went unbundled, and that saved us a ton. It's at least
Right.
$300,000 a year that we're saving just by doing that. So it's hard to, I don't know that we'll be able to squeeze a ton out without really getting into major plan design changes and things like that. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to come up with some concepts to really help a little bit there. So,
Okay.
yeah. And the number we gave you, or the percentage that Angela built into the projection there, you know, actuaries hate this because we're only, you know, got data for 4 or 5 months, and then we're trying to project what's going to happen to the rest of the year, which is always very dynamic. So, but by the end of the month, I think we'll probably have a better realization of where we're going to land. So it may not be as bad, but again, the two big drivers are what the market's telling us on inflation, on medical costs, and then also stop loss insurance. That market's kind of going through an upheaval right now, so,
Okay.
yeah.
I had a question. How come, this isn't half this, sorry, I'm gonna bounce, I'm sorry. Why are our transfer out and expenditures so much higher than in previous years?
The transfers out are the transfers to other funds that the general fund subsidizes.
Mhm.
That would be golf, airport, animal shelter, street, and special parks. Part of that, I believe, is in streets. We get projections from the league on what to budget for the highway revenue, and I believe that has decreased. Let me see if I can find that real fast. Yeah. Okay, well, part of it is equipment transfers for streets. And I think some other departments have transfers as well for MRF. So if streets or any of those other funds have transfers for MRF in a year, it will increase in this line item.
So what about the non-departmental transfers that show about a $1.2 million increase from the revised 2021 to 2022? Do you have any idea what all is included in that?
Let me see if I can show you.
It's under
It's a
the
little hard for me to see.
Expenditure summary by department.
What page are you on, Jade?
55.
55.
All right.
Just trying to ascertain what the $4 million difference is between the revised ending 2021 and 2022. And I know it's a lot of little things that add up, but there's a few that stand out. And I'm sure there are reasons for all of it, but just kind of curious.
Yes, so it is on your non-departmental page, the transfers out to the other funds. I'm trying to get you a page number here. I can't see that far. Okay, it's on page 111.
Found it.
So the special street fund is a lot of that.
A lot of that, and that is due to equipment. In the MRF, you can see there's $190,000 dump truck that needs replaced. That would probably be most of it.
Part of it. Well,
Yeah.
there seems to be about a $700,000 difference in the special street fund transfers out. Is that because last year was so low, because maybe we held off on a lot of that
Well,
replacement?
So it's that, and it's also hiring back 3 crew leaders. Those were cut due to COVID in '21.
Oh, got you.
So those salaries, that piece of MRF, equipment, those are all contributing to those, to that difference. And one of the reasons the '21 revised went down was because the state had said that the Kansas gas tax that we get was going to be $921,000, and now the revised figure is higher than that. It's $1,190,000. So our contribution to that street fund goes down because we're expected to increase our revenues from that line item as
Gotcha.
well. So there's several things going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to ascertain that from everything we're given.
Okay, help me out here, all right?
Okay.
Now, the $4.5 million, is that, help me, Dave Lyon here, Mr. Dave Lyon, is that reserve money that you want to come at the end of the year? Talk to me about that. What do we mean by that?
Well, that, Angie, please give us an overview, but
Okay.
the general fund, as I've related it to, is that is the remaining ending balance from all of our operational revenues versus expenses,
Okay,
separate from any dedicated funds from wastewater treatment or water sewer,
Correct.
whatever that may be. So,
That
in
would-
other words, they're not dedicated funds. They're
Right, that
somewhat
is,
discretionary.
right, especially being in the general fund. That has a huge impact on us financially, especially when we're looking at bond ratings. Because anything, the amount in the general fund can be used for anything that has a public purpose. So that's why the fund in the general fund is so important, is that we have that in case of emergencies. If we have a snowstorm, if we have really high gas bills from winter freeze or any emergency like that, tornado, heaven forbid. But then we have reserves so that we have that money to spend for those emergencies. And when we were talking about the $5.2 million that we wanted to have as cash in the general fund, that number is actually a recommended amount by agencies that we follow, the GFOA. They recommend that agencies have the higher of 2 months of revenue or 2 months of operating expenses in reserve available to spend. So that is approximately what ours would be, is the 5 to 5.2 million.
so what is our total budget? Is it 33 million, 44 million, what is it?
Our total budget for the general fund would be that like 38 million number. That would be our total budget for the general fund. But if you're talking organization-wide, it
Everything.
becomes different. And I don't have that figured because there's some of the other funds we're still fine-tuning. So.
It's almost double
It's,
that, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's about twice.
Close to it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's varied depending on CIP projects between
Yeah.
60 and 80 million or higher,
Yeah.
so.
So to make this simple for me, since I'm here new, this new budget year this year, so we try not to get into 4.5 reserve funds at the end of the year. That's what we're looking at, hopefully we have at the end of the year, correct?
Correct.
So we're looking at $100,000 for 2 people that we need desperately. And if we go over that if we go over our budget setting, whatever we're at, we're gonna dig into the $4.5 million with $100,000 per se. Am I right? Right, wrong?
Well, like, if we did end up hiring those two,
Mhm.
and Brian was fully staffed in the street fund,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we wouldn't have that $100,000 that we had budgeted as vacancies. So we try to be very conservative with that. And I think Brian was conservative with those 2 members, and it's not that he doesn't want authority to hire them. He wants to still be able to hire them if he can find the people to fill those positions. But he's thinking realistically, he'll at least average 2 vacancies throughout the year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I agree with Jay, there's the positions we need desperately.
Mhm.
So that's why I want to get a whole understanding about, simplify it a little bit for me, because this is a lot of stuff. I've been reading this even on
We
vacation.
could always get rid of some zoo employees.
Excuse me?
So, a few years ago, we revised our ending fund balance policy to try to hit that 2 months of operating expenses,
Mhm.
which is about that 5.2. But as Angela points out, if we aim for like a 4.5, 4.8, we're gonna hit that 5.2 because we never spend what we budget based on vacancies that weren't budgeted in as unbilled and other items, but.
And this is all just a guess, am I right or wrong on this? You're just guessing what you're
I
doing.
would like, I would like to
An
call it an
educated
guess.
educated guess.
Educated
Exactly,
guess.
Sarah.
Yeah. We do it all the time.
I mean, it is, like, sales tax revenue, nobody
Yeah.
none of my sources that I follow are willing to say, here's what we think is gonna happen in 22 with sales tax. So yes, it is just an educated guess, and I could be off, I could be under $500,000, you know.
So we go
But I
over the-
tried to be conservative in
So
what
we
I
go
thought.
over this $4.5 million, something happens, something great. We can't raise any taxes because we're set at that as soon as we set it, right?
As soon as you approve this budget, you are set at raising the revenue for property tax that you have approved in your budget, yes. That's what will be assessed to taxpayers on their property tax bills. So you cannot change that
For a year.
for a year.
Yeah, yeah, for a year, Steve. You're stuck.
Well, the reality of all this is really a painstaking process, and if you look, going to Angela's general fund, fund summary from 2019, our actual revenues was $33.7 million. In 2022 budget is 35.4, so about $2 million of revenue increase in one form or another, roughly. But our expenditures, 31.6 million actual in 2019, and it's projected for 2022 budget of 35.9. So we've got a $4.4 million increase in expenses versus $2 million in revenue. So we're I hate to say it in this way, but we got to be careful that we're not on a collision course here.
Yes, I'm gonna second that.
It's so painstaking, and my goodness gracious, what the staff has done to cut another 10% off our budget and fundamental basic needs. It's a painful process. So that's my thinking as far as the 4.5 as a more realistic number.
My concerns echo some of what he's saying for the 2023 budget. I feel is going to be really, really rough because I don't think we're going to have this extra 2 million that we have this year. Our expenses increased, and we have the Woody seat that's going to be coming up and being dealt with. And if we don't get the grant, what are we going to do?
We're gonna get the grant, Sarah.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, we have an extra 2 million because of our
You're gonna
conservative
bond
approach
it.
during COVID.
That's a
That's
And
a
now
bond.
we have,
Yeah.
You're gonna bond it, and we're just gonna
We'd have
go
to
into
bond
more
it
debt.
and,
yeah, but those are,
I know.
that's
I
gonna
know,
take up
but
our
that's-
whole bond.
But
Well,
If it's bonded at $10 million, we normally only
that's
bond
why that
6.
grant is so critical.
right,
Is what I'm saying, is like if
hopefully
we
we're successful at it.
decide to only bond 6 of it and try to interject the other 3 million or 4 million.
you're gonna
I
bond
mean,
all
or
of
we're
it.
just gonna have to bond more than we normally do. I mean, that's gonna be really hard
That's
talk,
That's-
that's what I'm saying. Because we do have, like, on some projects, you do subsidize with the general fund, and that's gonna be a discussion if we don't get the grant. Because we also have our bond rating we try to maintain, and the fact that, are we gonna be able to do I'm just really looking at 2023 going, I don't like the trend that I'm seeing here because we had an extra 2 million and now we're still struggling because our expenses shot up so high. And then, I mean, even the zoo went up. We're at, sorry, I know I always bring up the zoo, but can we cut a zookeeper? I mean, shouldn't we focus more on making sure that we have enough people in, I mean, we haven't cut a person at the zoo, but we've cut other positions for the city.
Angela, I'm going to ask a few questions on increases, and I don't want this to be interpreted by any department heads as negative. I just want to understand the differences. So I noticed that under the police, I'm on Expenditure Summary Apply Department, so page 55. So police administration and patrol have gone up. It's gone up about $800,000. And dispatch has gone up an additional $300,000. So just those two is a $1.2 million increase. Again, just want some clarification as to what merits that. Not questioning that it's meritable, just.
So dispatch, I know, because we'll have to explain this to the commissioners tomorrow. So they expanded the number of consoles they have, the number of stations for dispatchers, and that's increasing their miscellaneous contractual payments. There's maintenance costs associated with these. And so, feel free to jump in.
So it's
The
not,
thought
it's
is
not
that this
people.
is needed to maintain adequate services for this city.
So like increasing response times, or,
Do you wanna?
Yeah.
Let's see if yeah, we were not meeting national standards for our dispatch. We're not meeting dispatch response times for the fire department, for call-out times. We're not meeting our response times, getting calls for service out. And so we were looking at having to expand our dispatch consoles and expand those services to be able to provide that countywide. And during the remodel was the perfect time to do that. We didn't want to do a little remodel and then do it, so we expanded our basically footprint, expanded our different consoles to allow us to better serve our emergency services partners. But every time you add one of those consoles, you're required by, that's a state bill that we pay to be on the network, to be on the 911 network. And so those are contractual services based on the number of consoles we have. And so the consoles we have now for dispatch meet national standards and will bring us up to that service standard, but there's a cost involved in that. So that was, we knew this was coming whenever we expanded dispatch to meet those national standards, and during the remodel was obviously when was the best time to do that.
Okay,
this
so
is like
what
a
does this mean, an
one-time-
increase in personnel?
No increase in personnel.
Okay, okay.
We're doing the scheduling differently so we can man those specific
Okay.
consoles, but we didn't even have the facility to put a dispatcher in a seat
Yeah,
to
gotcha.
receive that call. This is going to allow us, instead of having a dispatcher answer a call for service and be trying to talk to the person here and dispatch over here, we'll be able to have a dispatcher take the call and another dispatcher being able to immediately dispatch it out, because we have the facility and the consoles to be able to meet that need.
Okay.
And it's an ongoing expense, correct?
Yeah, that will be an annual
Yeah,
ongoing
annual,
expense.
So does
Oh.
that roll into the police administration and patrol increase, which was 800,000? Or is that just a result of being able to hire unfilled positions, or?
Yeah, I'd have to look at that. I mean, we have unfilled positions this year that we cut knowing what a projected budget is going to be. So that would be if we were obviously full staffed.
Okay.
We also, and I don't know if it's reflected in that specific line, but we used to have police and we had administration budgets separate, and we merged those together. And so there used to be two separate lines that are now one. So you see an increase in that one line item, but in reality, it's not that big of an increase.
I combined them all for viewing purposes, so
Okay.
that doesn't make a difference.
Okay, there you go. So maybe that's not it.
Okay, thank you so much.
And while we're on that subject, the new fire station being built, is that the whole on this year, or did we divide that like we looked at doing that?
That would be a bonded project, and I looked at doing that, and we are okay to bond that this year, later this year, and start payments in 22, and not increase the mill levy and the bond and interest fund, and still be able to bond the projects that
Really?
were on there. We're actually in pretty good shape in the bond and interest fund, mainly because we didn't project to bond that many projects due to COVID in 20. So we're able to do that as a result of that.
So you're comfortable with that? Was it
I am.
7.2? Is that the number? Something like that.
Yes,
It's very
the
close.
number on the CIP sheet. Yes, I am comfortable with that.
You're comfortable with that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Angela, can you speak to the about $60,000 increase, or maybe $70,000 increase in the utility billing?
So, as a result of COVID, more people are paying online or over the phone, which increases our costs for credit card fees, and we eat those fees. We do not pass those on to customers. So, a large part of that is a result of that.
But we don't see that reflected in labor savings, that technology advancement?
No, because we're just passing it takes just as much time to process a credit card versus a mail payment.
Oh, I see.
Or
Okay.
somebody who came in.
Yeah.
So, we did cut out a part-time from the 21 revised because, we haven't hired that position back. So,
Okay.
And do we need 8 employees at the zoo?
I cannot speak to that. I don't know if Justin or Tom want to speak to that.
I believe some of those are jointly financed by the nonprofit
Friends.
board or the,
Yeah, by the Friends with the Zoo.
Correct. Yeah, one of them is fully supported by the Friends of the Zoo. That's our administrative aid. Realistically, to cut staff at the zoo, we would significantly reduce the programs or the
Yeah.
offerings we have. We balance overtime and vacation times right now just to maintain our hours being.
But don't a lot of the other departments struggle
They,
with cutting
yeah,
positions and not?
everybody does, yeah.
Because I noticed the zoo's now up to 828,000.
Yeah, and I also just want to continue to point out, when we did our statistically valid survey, we asked everybody about the top facilities in the city. The zoo was the third rate highest. So top was Dillon Nature Center, second was Neighborhood Parks, third was the zoo. So it scored higher than
Well, I still
trails and trails and sidewalks. It scored higher than the Aquatic Center. It scored higher than Memorial Hall, higher than Fun Valley. So the citizens are saying they want the zoo, and they want to see the zoo improve, because that was also one of the areas that they wanted to see more improvements done in that same survey. The zoo ranked just as high in that area. So could we cut an employee there? Yes. Would it impact a service that is being demanded by the citizens? Yes, it would. So,
I also think that streets are highly impacted, and we have trouble keeping employees in places that we need to, and other departments have cut, but
Thank you, Justin.
thank you, Justin.
Can we go back and revisit a minute the discussion? 68 to 70% of our budget is personnel, and an average merit increase of 3% is included. And whether or not we want to consider modifying that to, I'm suggesting 2.5%. I don't know what that impact is. Do you have a sense of what that number is? You've had that before.
I know. I
Yeah.
didn't project it for this year, but I
Okay.
could go back and look at what last year's numbers were.
Is it,
It just take me a couple of minutes.
is it
Um,
300 plus?
No, it would be less than that.
It would be less than 300 plus?
Mhm.
Okay, for that 0.5%.
Yes.
Okay.
Probably about 150,
Huh?
probably about 150.
About 150.
I want to say you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to go below 2.5. I think
No.
we have a hard
No,
time
I don't want,
I
I don't either.
No, no.
recruiting.
And I hate to even do
I
that,
hate to do that,
but
Angela, I did have another departmental line item budget question on engineering. It looks like from 2019 to 2022, there's been about a 40% increase in the budget. I don't know if that included combining accounts or what accounts for that.
No, engineering has a piece of equipment that I believe is really needed, that contributed to most of that. They have a plotter and scanner for 20,000 that's needing replaced.
Just one thing. Back in 2019, we were like so short-staffed.
yeah,
Oh,
So
hired.
Okay.
we didn't have inspectors and another engineer on staff at that point, and we were having trouble filling that at the time, so that's made up the biggest difference.
So that's really just a reflection of filling positions that were already.
Because that's, we don't have a lot of extra items in there besides people, so.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
And the scanner and the plotter is really needed at this point, because it's running on Windows 2000 still. And Todd doesn't like us to run it very often.
Oh, goodness.
I shouldn't even have said that.
Good job.
Yeah.
And then the last item I had on the departmental questions was IT budget. It's to have been increased by about 150,000.
That is software. I'll let
Software.
Todd.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a, you guys will remember back in 2014, we started the rental registration program. And I was instructed to come up with some magical software that would run the rental registration program. And so part of that process was converting inspection, code enforcement, planning, and zoning from the software that we were leaving to something. And in order to make rental registration work, I had to basically convert everything and kind of pigeonhole that into software. And then we had department heads that changed, and so I have been looking at replacing that software that's something that's compatible with everything else we're doing in the organization. And now that we have 2 directors that are on board and they're interested in a data-driven organization instead of just filling in a few forms, and you know, they've got nothing that backs up what they say. And so IT is tasked with then, okay, let's find them some software that gives them the ability to do their jobs better, that gives them the ability to fill you guys in with the information that you need. Because right now, if you ask planning and zoning and inspection, you know, they got to go back and wade through like paper, and it's a mess. And so I've gotten quotes over the years for replacing that software. We're looking at about a $300,000 expense to do that. It's an 18-month kind of a project. So I had put in the additional $300,000 for that software for planning, zoning, inspection, code enforcement, building permits. It kind of runs that whole side of City Hall. And so when the cuts came up, then, you know, trying to be creative, I moved half of that to another year. And so we cut $180,000 out of that budget, that line item that you're talking about. So generally, the $142,000 that lives in that line is just our replacement fund for like computers and servers and printers and scanners and all kinds of stuff that, you know, you have to keep up to date. You have to keep secure. You know, it's required that we replace it. And it's, you know, it's like police cars. You know, once it doesn't work anymore, you've got to replace it. So that usually is there, and then when you add $300,000 onto it, it looks really, really awful. So I took that plus the first question that you guys asked that on our first study session was, what's the $30,000 for the IT parking lot? We took that out because that was duplicated, and of course he cut the other side of it too, so we're not getting a parking lot. So there's still $137,000 or something additional in that line, but not 500,000 total. We cut 186,000 out of that line,
Okay, got you.
which is way more than 10%.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd, for that clarification.
I got a question. Is this the first time we went live with our budget meeting? We usually do it behind the doors. Am I right?
Second time.
Second
We
time?
decided that we want to be more transparent.
I agree with, but I just,
They've always been, they've always
open.
been open.
Have they?
They've always been open.
But I mean, this is the first time
We
we're
like
broadcasting.
stream it.
Okay.
Yeah, we brought
Yeah.
I mean, I think the pandemic has shown us how often and people, you know, use those mediums. So.
well, I think it's great so the taxpayer knows a little bit how the process works. I mean, I learned a lot, and from it, and imagine the taxpayer knows what we go through, what we are here on the hot seats today about, so what we go
Yeah.
through. So
Can I get an explanation on the print things cut off. Hold on. Let me go to my other thing. The residential street maintenance transfer. Why is the requested and recommended? Were you able to pull some other stuff, other areas to make up for that? Are we gonna be okay with that?
Are you talking about the CIP?
Yes. So it has the funds coming from special street growth, 29,000 from general fund, and then sales tax. I know that on the previous, we had a bigger dollar amount in the general fund, so we had reduced what we were taking out of the general fund to get to that higher balance.
Correct, and we used to have a lot more reserves, but we keep dwindling the reserves down each year, so more has
Yeah.
to come from someplace at this point. So we have numerous places where the street maintenance funds come for.
Because I saw
And
a
we-
huge cut from
Well, and
now.
and
Are
we
we
had
gonna be okay with
originally, we
that?
were recommended, what was originally recommended from the IMS study per year, just to essentially to maintain and increase our street conditions slowly. So with that, whatever's there in the long term, it means more potholes and those
Yeah.
types of things. So
And that's
a lot
not
more
what I'm not
maintenance,
okay
so-
with.
No, I know, but,
Is there, I mean, I hate to do this, I'm gonna be a Jade, what she talked about earlier is, can we really afford to cut there? I mean, at my point of view is, I'd rather not see some other stuff get funded and make sure that we get our streets taken care of. Can we increase that all and still cut somewhere else?
We can,
Because we can't keep doing this.
yeah, it gets pretty philosophical when you get into cuts. We then start talking about which operations and diminishment and service
Yeah.
levels. And that's a discussion that spills over from admin, obviously to you guys, because you guys will be the ones getting the phone calls too. But that's a group discussion, certainly a group decision.
Jeff, talk to me a little bit, or maybe Angela, you're better suited to answer this question about how our budget has changed in the last 3 to 4 years. I remember we invested heavily in streets, and we used to, as a community, not be anywhere where we needed to be. I mean, even the revised number represents quite an increase from where we used to invest, right? Or am I misunderstanding?
I have a handout on what it's actually been pretty stable, it hasn't really increased forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the biggest change this year is that those reserves ran out.
Okay.
So that's why it's making this year such a tough year, on top of some other things that have increased as we've heard, so.
This just kind of shows this is just our trail residential only.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
So if it's that big of a community priority, when the sports arena sales tax sunsets, maybe conversation needs to be had about upping
I
that.
think it's a huge, like, that's one of the things you hear about the most is people are very upset about the roads. And then when I see such a huge decrease in what's like requested and recommended, I mean, I understand that it's somewhat level to what we did in 2019, or I shouldn't say we, but you know what happened in 2000, I think 2017 is a little bit higher. I mean, I can see that, but to me, this is like one of the lowest. Besides 2019 and 18 is lower, but.
Jade, I would echo that we need to find a long-term solution as well.
Talk to me a little bit about that
'Cause
quarter
we're
cent
about
sales
1 million
tax
short-
and how much that
1
brings
million
in.
short every year.
Is that about, because I know that's split between Stratica and
I
the
think you have
Cosmos.
like $1 million to $1.2 million.
It's usually between 1.1 and 1.2 million that we collect for streets.
And we get we don't of that quarter cent, we get like 18 or?
I'm struggling to remember the breakdown, but you're right,
Oh,
part
what
goes
is it,
to,
about, 15%?
I think
40, actually 47% of the quarter.
Is it 47?
47.
Okay, 47%, Jeff? Okay, of the quarter cent. Okay.
And so it would be more than doubled if we received all of that. Not recommending that, just,
Well, that'd have to go back for a vote.
of course it would, yeah, of course.
So,
And I think that comes back up in 2024, I believe.
yeah.
And it would be devastating to our local museum institutions. It would devastate their budgets.
But I would say our budget's pretty devastated too.
But I would also say a
Well, we're
community is
shy
more than
one-
roads.
We're 1 million shy on keeping up the roads, and every year that we shorted $1 million, we're going further and further and further behind. If it needs to be 3.5 to maintain our roads, and we've consistently, since 2016, I don't even have the rest of the data, we've underfunded it by $1 million every year for the last 5 years. And I think that should be a topic of discussion.
Mhm. But where do you want to cut the million?
You guys know I want to cut it by personnel, by combining departments, getting rid of some overhead costs and benefit costs, and creating some efficiencies and centralization. I think that we don't have a lot of people on the ground. I would like to have more competitive pay for employees that are, and have reduced middle management, upper management, save on benefit costs, and a slight increase on laborers, and a complete revamp of some of our waste within personnel to have a long-term savings so that we can start paying for stuff that we need to pay for.
Well, again, this goes back to what Jeff said, philosophical differences. I think roads are important, one of the most important things to in a variety of fashions, safety, economic development, et cetera.
I
The
know that's not a
community-
solution we're gonna fix today.
Yeah, the community is
But-
more than roads.
Yeah, I think that's for future councils to consider, because on the horizon will be that quarter cent sales tax. It will also be an opportunity because that sports arena sales tax will sunset. And there could be an opportunity there, who knows, to ask the voters to consider continuing that, if there's something to provide back to them, whether it's streets, whatever that may be. So those are, I think, are opportunities for future city
What year
councils
does
to
what year does the sports arena sunset? You said 2024.
consider. 2024, I think.
it goes through 25, but we're
25.
projecting that we'll
We're
pay off
guessing,
the bonds
aren't we?
Yeah.
mid
So
24.
both are set for 2024, the quarter cent and the sports arena.
I think the votes in,
Oh.
I can't speak to that
You can
one.
re-vote. Oh.
Okay, so the vote would probably be in November of 23.
23.
Jeff, are you doing a study on how we're working as far as, did I hear you tell us that one time, we're doing a study on how we are management-wise, are we functional? Am I right on that?
Yeah, out of our work session, that was one of the primary goals that came out of that. And we've got RFPs in from 2 separate groups that are interested in doing that work. I think one is close to $90,000 for the study, and it looks very thorough, very complete based on their scope of recommended services. The other one came in quite a bit cheaper, but after reviewing their submittal, it's probably not one I would recommend based on how minimal it was. So yeah, we are holding certain movements and staffing decisions based upon the return of that study of those select departments. That wasn't citywide, that was limited to parks, public works, and it'll get into engineering a little bit too, because there's some crossover that rolls through that department, even though it's quite small. So we are waiting for that to come back. We're very close.
That'd be a big tool for us to help what Sarah would like to see happen.
It could be.
Yes.
It could
Yeah, I
be.
think it's definitely multifaceted. I mean, if we put it up to a vote and let's say when the sports arena sunsets, and we put it to a vote, and they voted in, and half of it goes to street and half of it goes to parks and recs. That's gonna relieve some of the transfers out on our general fund.
Exactly. I think that's a better solution than
I would think it both.
making massive cuts that impact service provision and quality of life in Hutchinson.
I'm just saying, these are the things we need to talk about, because as far as the trend going right now, we're gonna hit a. I mean, I'm not okay with how much we're funding the streets. And, but I honestly did go through every single one of these pages. I know I don't have the revised version on Excel, but I have the original one. And I couldn't find anywhere to cut more than what you guys already came back with. Like, I have highlighted on my spreadsheet everything I decided to cut and everything you came back with. I don't know, I can't show you, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them were identical. So I'm like, okay. I went through it, I came up with I want more money here, but unless we do something different, where are we going to get it from? And that's my frustration. My head almost wanted to explode by the time that I got through all of this, because outside of personnel, we don't have the funding to fund what we need to fund. I can't find any more to cut. I have some, but then even if we took out the 30,000 for trail improvements and moved it to streets, that's just 30,000. That's not enough to make up the difference that we need to fund for the streets. Now, I wouldn't be opposed to cutting the 30,000 for trail improvements.
Well, I think we're talking about a structural imbalance,
Yeah.
which again points to the need for a long-term solution that
Yeah.
doesn't lie in slashing staff, that again further reduces quality of life here. I think that things like $30,000 for trail improvements, again, doesn't make a huge dent in any other pot, but it's a small amount, a token amount that makes, offers a huge benefit in quality of life. Again, going back to comments I made earlier about some of the recommendations of the Housing Commission for revolving loan fund for housing improvements and sidewalk fund. I mean, tiny, tiny amounts that are on the chopping block every year that could make a much broader impact on quality of life. Just a tiny amount. We always bicker about these tiny amounts that have great ripple and leveraging effects, I think.
This is always going to be a problem of any kind of public entity, whether it's a city, whether it's a school district, anything that's funded by taxes is always going to run into this conundrum, because people are what we are spending the bulk of the money on. And if you really want to save money, you have to cut people.
Yeah.
And so, the study that we're going to do, maybe that will lend some light on areas where we could be more efficient. But until we get that,
We're stuck here.
we're stuck right here.
Yeah. And I noticed that all the CIP transfers and it's like under $1 million. If we decided to even cut everything off there, the general fund impact is like under $1 million. So where are we gonna find the cuts to get it to the 4.5? The MERF transfers, I mean, is that the only place left?
It is at the point, I think, a lot of departments have felt the pain and feel like any more cuts will reduce services. I've heard that from several departments at least. I don't want to speak for all, but several have said that.
Yeah.
I applaud you all for this discussion. If it's private business, you pass it on to the consumer. That's what happens. You go buy fuel at the pump, you're going to pay the price because they had to pay more when they had it bulk delivered. So the consideration of cuts is probably more palatable to the public in general versus talking about increasing property taxes. And there's other cities that do that almost every year in a row, because they have no choice. Because if they want to maintain certain service levels or not defer projects, that's one of the three legs of the stool that has to be discussed. It's not fashionable, it's not popular, but it does give good context to the discussion going on right now and how we can balance that without having to hit property owners with increases. So I get it.
So Jeff, at this point, we would say that if we're on agreement right now in the discussion we have made, that we would say, no, correct me if I'm wrong here, we go 4.5, that was suggested by Mr. Dave Line, and if we don't have no more discussions, we would say we set the budget what it is right now. Am I right? That it's gonna, right?
much.
My only caveat to that would be the question of the merit rate of something less than 3%. I'm suggesting 2.5%.
I don't agree with that at all. You got hardworking people, they
Oh, I
come
understand that.
in. Yeah,
I know,
no.
but we still got a gap here.
Well, got a gap.
We got a gap, and so I
I-
was just looking at a way to fill a portion of that gap.
Well, our employees are our only thing that we have to give to the citizens of Hutchinson, Kansas. We barely can't keep employees now, so you start cutting their wages, and trust me, that
No,
will
we're
get.
not cutting wages.
No, not
We're
giving them a
just not,
greatest-
we're just
We're
not
establishing
increasing
a
as
merit,
much.
Right.
Base of 2.5, which is consistent with what we did last year.
Right. Well, then again, that's your opinion. My opinion say we stay at the rate of 3. And if I'm the only one, I'm the only one. So, but other than that,
Has there been a long extended freeze before as far as rate increases? Have
Not
we
since
ever-
'09 was the last
Yeah.
freeze. The last time wage increases were not
'Cause
given.
I know my company did like 6 years wage freezes when they were going through a bad time.
Didn't we do
I
it
think
one
we did
other
it- I
year?
think we did it about 14 or 15, Angela,
Yeah.
do
Oh,
you
did we?
recall that we had a freeze?
I can't recall. I started
I know we
here
had it
in
in 09,
October of
but-
15, so I
Okay.
can't recall.
We may have done
I'm
just a
just saying, I'm trying
hiring
to be
freeze.
sympathetic
Maybe it was a
to
hiring
both,
freeze.
like,
Maybe
Tom
has-
should
Tom has
know.
Yeah,
some
maybe you're
recollection
right,
of
Dave
that.
Line. Maybe I forgot that.
The years all blend together, so I can't
Yeah.
tell you exactly what year it was, but I think it was 2011,
yes.
maybe.
Was it 11?
And that's the only time that we did nothing.
Okay,
Yeah,
11.
at least in.
I
since
mean,
I've been here.
we've done some hiring freezes.
Yes, we've done
Yeah.
hiring
Several of
freezes.
those.
We
Yes,
did.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, we've cut headcounts, things like that. But
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of not doing any increases for employees, it was just, I think, 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were not here.
Do you feel like you've gotten any direction from us at all?
Lots of ideas, but
well, I'm gonna go back to, I've looked at all of this, and even if we cut everything, like, it has to come from the MRF, right? Like, where else are you gonna get it from?
that
Do you have any more ideas? I mean, I looked and I couldn't.
But the MRF is always the redheaded stepchild, and so
Yeah.
it's years and
Mhm.
years of, putting that off.
and we've talked to the central garage supervisor, and everything he thinks can be delayed is delayed in this budget already. And so the things that are left are things he thinks need replaced.
Were there
Like-
any departments that didn't take any cut?
I know I didn't cut the finance budget except for like $500 because
It's one person. Yeah.
Kind of already a skeleton crew.
Yeah.
and there's a few departments like that we're only able to make small cuts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For like the mill and overlay, you have 191,000 coming out of the general fund.
I gotta read this to you
Any way
guys.
bond some of this?
You guys will appreciate this. And Justin, with your indulgence, I'm gonna read one of our texts that we had when it comes to MRF items. And I went out and personally looked at the equipment. I have looked at a lot of the equipment that we've decided to defer and kick down the road so that we can soften the blow here. So I sent him a text, said, well, Justin, I can't say you're wrong. Unit 106, it's a pretty nasty looking unit. Sorry, we're not going to be able to replace it this year. And he said, yep, not exactly the type of impression I like to make in our parks. I told him we had to remove it from the MRF. Very sorry, I agree with you. It's a nasty looking piece of equipment. Nevertheless, it's one that you wouldn't take it out of town, but it's something that you could probably drive locally. And Justin responds, thanks for looking at it. I'll make sure we have a broom to shovel to clean up the rust that leaves behind when we park it. And I said, LOL, agree, it's a POS. But nevertheless, it's one we're going to leave in the fleet for another year to accommodate exactly what you're talking about, Sarah. So
Yeah.
it's everyone's had texts like this, so we've all been
Yeah.
in the trenches.
For the mill and overlay with the 191,000 out of the general fund, can any of those projects be bonded so that we don't have to transfer as much? Or
I think
is
they
there
have
like
to be
combination
greater
projects
than
or?
10 years, right? And aren't those mill and overlays?
It's more maintenance, it's not.
Yeah, it,
Yeah, it's more maintenance, okay.
It's
So I
not
don't
a
know I don't know
project.
the rules on bonding, but.
I think technically you probably could, but it's probably not the best practice to, because you're bonding normal maintenance
Okay.
costs.
I wasn't sure what, because when it just says mill and overlay, you're like,
That's typically on our arterials, the mill and overlays. We try to keep those in pretty good shape as we
Okay.
can for what we have, so, when it's just, and we've been doing other processes on some of the arterials lately too, with,
I'm just trying to
Scrub
get
seals and
creative so
other
we don't have
things.
to hit the MRF so hard. Like, is there any way to,
So again,
I don't
back to our targeted goal, I guess there was a consensus of 4.5 million balance for 2022.
Mhm.
Leaves a gap of $325,000. My one suggestion is to modify the 3% down to 2.5%. That would be a portion of it. What other specific line items can any of us identify, or Angela?
Todd, can
So
you
we got a
do,
$325,000 gap here.
yeah, Todd, can you do lease purchase on software? Okay, I thought we did once at the school district. Okay. You sure? Because I sure remember doing it at 308.
You can on some software, but Tyler
Mhm.
doesn't have that program.
Okay.
So,
We would have to see if a local bank would, and
Okay.
I'm not sure. I have never asked that question before. There's
And
nothing tangible for them to reclaim if
Pledge.
you default, so
Mhm.
I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, but as a public institution, the chances of your defaulting are much
Right.
less
Yeah.
than they would be in a private same thing's true of equipment. Can you lease purchase some of the equipment on the MRF rather than go ahead and pay for it all up front? If you can, you might be able to cut it.
The only thing I think we could on the MRF is the street dump truck. But then I talked with Brian about that, and he
Mhm.
has other large equipment that needs replaced in the coming years in 23 and 24.
Mhm.
So then we would be making a lease payment on a piece of equipment and trying to fund another one.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just looking
I
at
know.
all the
I-
possible options out
I
there.
looked at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand this, Mr. Dave Lyon. We had 325 gap,
Yeah, we got
correct?
a gap.
Mm-hmm.
So if we leave it the way it is, does it affect the 4.5?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, that's. what I-
Possibly.
Well, we don't come up with a
Possibly.
gap, then it would be that number there, and I guess ideally, I would like to have the published budget at a 4.5.
But it does affect the 4.5, we leave it the way it is at 325,000 gap, right?
It would, yes.
Yeah.
So what,
Might be something greater than that, but it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, that ending number is a target.
It's a target.
It's not
I
a given,
get
there's
that.
no way we're gonna be able to ensure that we're gonna get,
And a year ago, we budgeted,
Yeah,
3.9.
3.9.
mm-hmm,
You know,
so,
how hard and fast are we on that?
We took a lot of very aggressive approach though in sales, learn sales up.
What was the increase in sales tax revenues throughout COVID? It was pretty substantial, almost every month, right?
Every month after May, I believe, it increased, yes.
And we anticipate losing some of those gains with the increase in travel outside of the city.
I
think you will.
budgeted it at flat, I
You-
believe.
you were flat.
Anticipating
Okay.
that normal years see a slight increase. So if I budgeted flat, maybe it would level out. That is just an educated guess.
A safe one. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the deal. You have department heads that gave their best and cutting what they think they can get by for the year. Everybody so far that I've seen has done the best they can to dig down deep to see if we can go get a budget. You yourself, Ms. Sarah, said that you've gone through it and you're a numbers person, a lot more than I am. And you say you can't see where anything to cut. I don't believe in picking on employees, they're hard workers, but that's just an educated guess at 3%. There's a lot to go with that, because I know a lot to go to that before we get to that point.
Yeah,
So I don't know what else we can do.
yeah, as far as the numbers go, there were two things I didn't have. I didn't have the MRF in Excel, and I didn't have personnel at each individual. Like if you cut personnel here, you cut there. Using the approach of just reducing the 3.5 is taking off a chunk to that. Just looking on the scope of, this is our overhead. This is our revenues. And I went through everything, but like I said, the MRF and what, obviously I'm not gonna know what everybody gets paid, within, so I can't go through that with a fine tooth now. I can't find anything for, like, I have some stuff on here, like I have them highlighted in yellow and orange. The yellow are the ones that we both agreed on. I have some orange items that I'd like to ask about. One of them was, I guess I'll just go through my notes. Fire station is, you have that. I think we already actually discussed it though, but on my notes, we discussed splitting that bond between 2 years. And then on my note, it says, of course, this one's higher here. It's like at 8 and this one's only at 7. You said you're okay with that, and is that why we kept it in the 1 year?
Yes, we could split it over 2 years. I don't.
But
think
that's
we would
just
need-
as far as, that has nothing to do with the general fund, that's just as far as
No.
keeping that 6
Exactly.
million. So that was my one question, just referencing the 6 million bond amount. My other question, which we kind of went over, I said, are we cutting from 1.8 million to 794,000 for the street maintenance, and the 2 million to 1.6 for the mill overlay, and then between the 191,000 and the 160,000 that you have coming out of the general fund for those two at the reduced cost, are you able to bond that? That's a question I have on here, just because that's, a $300,000 and it's street maintenance. Is there any way we could kind of play with that? And other than asking about because I didn't know if we needed to cut to the 6 million for the general fund, but now that we don't, that question's not needed. But I had my question about the 300,000 for that, and if we did go the bonding, could we increase it so that we're funding it even more and maybe getting to that 3.5 million? Those are the only questions I have on my thing. I did go through every single thing, and unless you're cutting out of, your overhead costs as far as personnel goes, and having that 2.5 to 3 that kind of a rush to just whack some costs off without having to go through and actually decide like where to cut people. I mean, we kind of have to decide, are we going to cut people, or are we going to take that stress and kind of brush it out on everybody by reducing it to the 2.5?
My point of view in this whole thing is that you have to, we're like a business, and it takes that kind of money on this budget here to run this business. We gotta have people to run the business. All we have to offer in business is our people and services.
Yeah.
We cut people, we cut services. And then the people, when they work hard, they deserve a raise. I'm not
Yeah.
saying 3%, but that's whatever it is, at least we have, anyway, they deserve the raise. So it takes this kind of budget to run the city. That's what I say. It takes this kind of money to run the city. We had a very good talk on where we can cut. I mean, I've gotten really educated on budget even in Mexico when I'm sitting there at home watching it there. I looked at this paperwork and then I visited with her when I came back to understand this a little more. The way I look at it, it takes this kind of money to run this business. And we are a business. And the business that we have is the people that run this city. And we got to have this kind of personnel to run it. So, that being said, that $350,000 would have dropped the mill levy, help me, $4 million, so it'll take 350 off the 4.5?
No, she's keeping the mill
No,
levy
she's keeping
flat.
the mill levy, at
Flat.
the current.
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct.
We're not increasing it,
Not
but we're
increasing
keeping
it.
it flat.
My whole point of it is, why can't we just set it with 350,000 gap? Why do we,
325.
325? Why do we have to keep looking for gut? This is what it takes to run the city.
Theoretically, we don't,
Yeah.
because that 4.5 is a target.
Right,
That's what we're saying we'd like to get to.
right.
If you're convinced, if everyone's consent with leaving it at 4.1,
Mm-hmm.
then we're fine. We're done. We're basically good to go, right, Angela?
Correct.
So,
You
you know,
could
the
call it
decision
enough.
is, are we gonna go aim for 4.5 as an ending balance? Chances are, we're gonna hit it anyway.
I just can't believe we're going from 7.1 to 4.
I know,
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah, that's
but,
Just,
you know, it's the way of the world. You know, I mean, we can sit here and argue over that 300,000 until the cows come home, but they're still gonna come home. So, you know, if you wanna set it at 4.1, set it at 4.1 and hope that we come in
I'm
at
gonna
4.5.
I'm gonna ask that we side with Dave Line on this one, and I hate to say it, but the 2.5 instead of the 3. A lot of companies, if they're having bad struggling years, they don't always give full
Yeah.
raises.
That'll probably get us up to about 4.35.
Yeah.
I'd say
That's your decision. That's the way you look at it.
it's still a pretty good raise.
Well, I guess you make the move for that and see what happens.
Well, I'd recommend again 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go ahead and recommend the 2.5.
I would concur. I
Is
think
that or cutting people? And I'd rather spread the
spread the
across
pain.
everybody. Well, right, spread the cost across everybody instead of telling some people, you know,
Yeah, no,
you're not
I,
gonna have a
I,
job tomorrow.
I
You
agree.
know, sharing the expense by everybody taking into that 0.5%.
Well, the way I look at it, you don't have anybody to cut, even if you wanted to. The police department, I don't know how many people he cut already. Brian's got 2 people he cut already. Even if you went to 3% and you had to cut people, you've got nowhere to cut. You don't have enough people to run the city now.
Well, when it comes down to it, we have the MERV and people. We have our overhead costs and the MERV. That's all that's really left. I mean, we could cut
We could-
$60,000 from Parks and Recreation and just not fund
I guess what I'm
any of
trying to
Parks
say
and
is this.
Recreation, and
If we
then
have
we
to-
can cut our streets and we can cut all of these services.
Here's my point. If we have to go to 4.1 and keep the people and give them they still have to go negotiations. That's not a set deal, all right? So if you go to 4.1 and leave it the way it is, that's the way it is. That's what it costs to run the city. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. If you went 2.5 and had to cut people, you got nobody to cut. There's nobody to cut. We run short on police department, engineering department.
I've had a raise before. It's like it was like 2.8%, and I think it was like 48 cents.
Yeah.
You know, because I made what $9 an hour, and I got I got a 48-cent raise. Would I care if I got a 32-cent raise opposed to a 48% raise?
Yeah.
If that helps us get to where we need
That's
to
here
get,
and there.
I'm not entirely sure.
That's your point of view, and I appreciate your point of view, but I'll let you know my point of view. If
Yeah.
that's the case, then I suggest we go to 4.1. And that's my point of view. This is what it takes to run this city. So, and you got nobody to cut. We need police officers. We need our public works division needs people. Brian, how many people down are you, Brian? Where are you at, Brian? How many people down are you?
I think it was 7 last time we talked.
Yeah, in the street division, we're down 7 right
We're
now.
down 7.
Just
No.
due to vacancies.
Yes,
Mhm.
It's funded to be only 3 down.
But there's a proviso to fund those positions.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're
It's
not
just we
cutting
can't
those
find,
positions.
we can't find the
No,
people.
Yeah, we're not cutting your budget.
It's very tough to find.
I know,
Mhm.
I know.
Applicants.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Please, Mr. Chief, can you stand up here, all right, please? You said you cut officers this year. How many did you have to, or you didn't put them on the budget, right?
Yeah, we revised our budget for our current staffing levels, so.
How many did you have, what positions you had to let go to get?
We haven't had to let any go. We have vacant positions
Right.
that we aren't paying for this year. And so we revised our 2021 budget to reflect where we project will be at the end of the year.
Question for you. So these positions that you revised, you needed them if you wouldn't have put them on the paperwork. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, correct.
Correct. That's my whole point. You needed those positions, but you went ahead and default them. I don't know if I'm using the right word, but you didn't put them on there to make this year's budget, right?
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's not like we're not trying to fill the positions. We're
Right.
trying to hire them, but we're
Mhm.
short positions. And so since we've been short those positions through the first 6 months of the year, we know we've saved that money because
Right.
we didn't pay for those positions.
Right.
But we are trying to fill those positions because it affects our services and what we're able
Right.
to do in the community, of course,
Right.
having vacant positions.
But now the 22, those budgets, ones that you haven't made, that you can't find people to play, you can't find them. Did you do away with them in 222? Did you do?
We didn't eliminate the positions, so that's where you see, that's what Jade was talking about earlier,
Uh-huh.
the increase in that line item, because we had empty positions this year, but next year we're funding to be full staffed.
Gotcha.
Do I think that we'll be full staffed next year, the whole
No.
year? No, that's not going to
No.
happen. So that projected funding that we're looking for to be full staff, we'll have some savings there at the end of the year. That's where they're talking about that 4.17 might actually be higher, because we'll have
Right.
unfilled positions,
I got you.
even though we strive
So
to
the
fill those
positions are
positions.
funded.
Yes, got
Yeah.
you.
We just
the
don't have
positions are
people
funded.
working
Positions
them.
are funded.
Okay,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you.
I think that's an important message to the public, is
Yes.
that as a governing
Yeah.
body and as a city, we have not cut positions.
They're just empty.
No, if you're talking about police officers, my authorized strength is funded for
Mhm.
2021 and projected funded for 2022. You haven't cut any of those
We have
positions.
not cut any of those
Correct.
positions. That should be clear, and a clear message to the public.
But I guess I'm misunderstanding. You had 7 positions per se. You didn't put it in the 22 budget just to get to the point where you're 10%. Do you understand me?
We did not cut,
No, you didn't cut.
we didn't,
Go ahead.
the positions that were vacant right now that we saved money for this year gives more, and we revised our 2021 budget to show those cost savings. And so those cost savings carry over to 2022 because we didn't spend it in 2021.
Yeah.
So that gives some cost savings for 2022. That's where that revised budget comes in.
Got you. I understand it now. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Basically, what he did was increase the $7.1 million number in the 2020 revised column. Like,
Okay.
his cuts were part of how we got that to 7.1. But he's still funding the expenses in the 22 column.
Okay. So, you wanna make that, you gotta make a motion, whatever you wanna do?
Well, I'm curious if anyone in the audience
Yeah,
has
what's that?
comments about the budget.
Anybody in the audience like to speak?
Well, we have to have an official budget hearing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we aren't gonna make them, we don't have to make a motion
Correct.
tonight.
And because we're keeping the mill levy the same and not
Yeah.
decreasing it to the revenue neutral rate, we cannot have that budget hearing until after August 20th. And
Good.
it's between August 20th and September 20th, I believe. Yes, it must be between August 20th and September 20th, and then we'll certify our budget to the county on October 1st.
Score, I want to go to vacation in August.
Not then.
Well, I hate to keep
Before
hammering
that.
this question, but for clarity purposes, did I hear that there were at least 3 council persons that supported the 2.5% merit
Mhm.
increase? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you, me, Sarah.
So
That
does
was my
turn up-
impression.
Does
I
that turn up
Mhm.
direction for the staff?
thought we had a majority, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thank you.
Because, I mean, you got to remember, you're still paying part of the health insurance, you're paying their capers contribution, you're paying workman's comp. I mean, there's so many things that you pay in addition to just straight salary that are benefits to the employee. So, anyway,
Yes, but all the other companies in this town pay the same thing, but their wages are higher.
no, they
Well,
don't have
no,
to, they
my
don't have
insurance
capers.
is really bad.
Steve.
I work for a small private company, and my insurance is so bad that when my husband changed jobs and I needed to put the whole family on my insurance, my company only pays for the employee, not any of the family. So the family, it's straight costs, whatever it costs. I was actually going to have to pay the company $48 after I worked a 40-hour week to cover my entire family on health insurance. Because they only cover just the employees. Anybody extra that you add on to his family, it's at complete cost.
Yep.
And I'm pretty and there's also a lot of smaller companies. I know a place in McPherson where after the after Obamacare was like established, they decided that they would keep their staff at a certain level under the 50 and completely dropped health insurance because they couldn't afford to. So there are some places that don't even have health insurance, and they have a hard time getting employees to
Mhm.
work there because the health insurances go through the marketplace. So I can say, but I have worked for places that have really good health insurance as well. I would say that the city has a benefit as being a self-payer. I know another company in town that's like that, and it's really good insurance. So I would say that, I'm going to say it once again, we can choose a small decrease where everybody gets a few cents trimmed off, or we can cut some positions. Like, let's say the 7 that he has fully funded, we're going to only, even though there are 7 vacancies, we're not going to fund 7 of them next year. We're only going to fund 4 off the budget, and we're going to save in health insurance costs and all of those projected costs that go with the employee. And we can do that. We can go and say, how many vacancies do you guys all have? Let's cut, let's say, so then you don't have as much of that conservative approach to the general fund, right? Because right now, we always tend to have, I know I'm getting outside my bubble here in my brain. So let's say 4.1, Steve. And we're conservative, we're still fully funding that 7 and that 4 and that 15. Well, there probably won't get staff because it's hard to get people, sometimes staff, or just to get people in there. It's going to bring us up to the 4.5. That's like conservative. And we give the 3% raise, right? That would be everything that how it's probably going to land if we stick with that. It'll be around the 4.5. We have some vacancies and there's some savings because we were conservative. We didn't fill out things. Or we can do the 2.5 versus 3, and that's going to put us at what, 4.3?
Close.
approximately.
right? It's gonna put us at 4.3, we're gonna have some of those vacancies, and that's gonna probably push us up to 4.7 ending balance, okay, because of our conservative approach. Or we can keep the 3, and we can not take such a conservative approach and ask every one of these people out here, how many vacancies do you have, and how many can we just not fund next year? So that we can get to that end of balance, be less conservative, and still give that 3%. I mean, these are all different scenarios that are gonna take place when we're talking about, pay, benefits, I mean, right? Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I am with you that I would much rather drop a proposed increase from 3 to 2.5 than to eliminate positions or, keep positions unfilled in the budget that may need to be filled.
Yeah.
But I do want to mention that you are grossly undervalued by your employer. And I hope we never use as a benchmark companies that grossly undervalue their employees.
Well, no, my boss is really nice, and she's the best boss I could ever have. I'm just saying not every company has best insurance because they're small companies.
Yeah, no, I know that. I just think it's difficult enough to recruit high-quality employees without implying that they shouldn't get what they're worthy of. And I know that you're not saying that, but I just don't, I hope it doesn't come off that way to employees listening, that we don't support them.
Okay, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
So, we had what they call 2.5. I guess that's what they want you to go.
Still not gonna give me any money for sidewalks, Steve? No money for sidewalks. Come on, no money for sidewalks? I've been asking for like 8 years. Banging my head against the wall here. No sidewalks?
I think we should fund sidewalks. So I'm with Jade on that because, and the only reason why I bring this up is because, think about the way that our school districts are set up in this city. Is it the sidewalks, every local, or we don't have like a bus system. It's like kids are having to walk on these really bad sidewalks to get to school because that's how our kids get to school in this town. We don't even have a bus route. Like our sidewalks are supposed to be the main transportation for children in this town, and they're really bad.
And I know the Housing Commission did a little bit of research on what it would cost to replace a sidewalk, and it's not that substantial. So even if you just put a small amount of money, like $20,000 in grants, in a grant pool for sidewalks, and limit that up to $1,000 per home, which I think was the Housing Commission proposal, that can make a big impact if you focused it in those featured neighborhoods or on school routes. You could set it up any way the Housing Commission recommended based on their expertise, but just something to
And it's
get
not
it going.
completely uncommon for cities to do a 50-50, 20-70 match because it is a public right-of-way and it's kind of a shared cost. And it's not, some cities will fund 80-20. I mean, it's not something that's uncommon for cities to have a shared fund in a public right-of-way like sidewalks, even if it is the property owners, because it is that right-of-way and there's benefit to both the city and the property owner, and so they do those cost share splits. So that's not uncommon.
Jeff, normally don't we fund sidewalk improvements when we do street improvements? Because I noticed this was marked ADA sidewalk.
Well, I think the ADA sidewalk is actually under
Under Justin?
Justin's, but we have
Okay.
ADA ramps
Yeah.
under engineering, and that's to fund those, when we do mill and overlays and those types of things, to upgrade the ramps along there. Sidewalks per se, if we have a reconstruct, we typically do
We do
sidewalk
sidewalks.
work. And those are typically on our
Arterial, not on residential.
Not on
Yeah,
residential.
not
Not
a
like
residential, yeah.
school
Okay.
routes. And again, this would be a fund totally separate. This would be, I think what I'm recommending is more under Ryan's budget to be like guided by the Housing Commission, but
Just to clarify, on the two sidewalk cuts you see on your sheet, the one that's labeled ADA, that falls within my department, and that's purely for city-owned facilities. So it'd be to replace sidewalks in front of City Hall or in a park or something like that. I just looked, there's currently a little over $40,000 in that reserve, so I felt comfortable we could back that funding off for a year or 2 years, depending on need. So that's not a sidewalk connecting to a neighborhood through a public school. The other cut is, I believe, that's in engineering or public works, but the one that's labeled ADA is for public facilities only, and there is reserve there.
Thank you for clarifying
Thank you.
that.
To do what you want to do, if we add more money to it, do we have to take that money from some other budget? Talk to me.
Okay, this
Yep.
is, I know I'm adding
You
to the
robbed
budget,
Peter to
Steve.
pay
I'm
Paul.
talking about a minuscule $20,000 that would have a massive impact. Again, going back to some of these programs or innovative ideas that never get off the ground, even though they represent, a minor expenditure. They don't impact the budget in a big way, but they impact the quality of life in a big way. It's just a small
Maybe-
little
We could
amount.
give 15 the trail improvements and 15 the sidewalk.
Maybe that's something we ought to think about as part of the federal ARP money.
Well,
Maybe
it can't
setting
be
up-
used for sidewalks. I already asked that question in a webinar. That
Oh, it
was
can't be
according
used
to
for
the interim final
sidewalks?
rule. Well, according to interim final rule, but final rule comes out in what? End of July 20th?
No, 15.
Something like that.
The 15th?
The caveat there, though, is that we have the ability to look at any lost revenue
Mhm.
with a 4.1 inflation rate. So you would take 2020's revenue compared to 2019's revenue in total. So it's not specific to transient guest tax or anything like that. It's total. And then you would inflate 2019's numbers by 4.1% and compare. Anything that is then identified as revenue loss, you can use for whatever means you want, with a couple caveats, like you can't pay a capers deficit or something like that. But
Right, and you can't reduce taxes.
But with our sales tax revenue increases, are we still going to come out with a loss compared to 2019?
now I haven't spent a ton of time looking at that because I don't know what is going on behind the scenes and the chamber and what work they're doing there. But I think we will have at least somewhat. And then there's also the option to look at 21 and 22 and I think 23.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, well, that's promising.
The whole point of it is, we give you $20,000, do we leave it up to Jeff where he gets the rest of 20,000? Or, where do we, because I see a domino effect, we give you 20 and it's our domino.
I hate to do this. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
feel embarrassed.
Go ahead.
But I've cherry-picked forestry and horticulture. Sorry about that. They've had a pretty substantial increase over the last several years as far as their operating budget. And I've got the first draft here, but the revised 2021 versus the 2022 budget, there's about right at $200,000. So if you could decrease this line item by $20,000 to forestry and horticulture, fund this, Jay, would that solve the problem?
Oh, what's in that?
Well,
I mean, I
200,000 is a lot different than 20 grand.
Huh?
Are we-
I don't think we're growing that many plants.
Yeah, what constitutes that increase?
Well, here it comes.
I gotta say, I love
Yeah.
it, Justin. I love what you're doing in that realm.
Yeah, I do too, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
That is one I took a pretty hard look at in this first round of cuts. So personnel services is a big chunk of that. Contractual services, we did increase that quite a bit. One thing we're looking at there is because of all the mowing complaints that we got last year.
Oh.
We're looking at
Okay.
contracting out some additional mowing as a cost savings, as opposed to trying to hire more seasonals. We have a really hard time hiring seasonals, and so we're looking at contracting out a little bit more mowing. If you remember, a couple years ago, we took on all the ditch and right-of-way mowing
Right.
from Public Works, which did eliminate 3 full-time positions, or 5 full-time positions. And so there is a jump if you go back a couple years further.
Yeah.
It's where we took on a lot of additional mowing that we're doing with seasonal labor.
So that's
now
not
we're
like the
still trying
tulip
to-
budget.
What's that?
That's not like the tulip budget. That's like
No.
some serious mowing and,
That's
I-
mowing of the right-of-ways and parks and all of that.
and
Yeah,
the
our-
cuts were apparent. I got lots of complaints because of I mean, which is what happens when you
Yeah.
decrease
We
services.
don't fill those seasonal positions, yeah, people know, so. And because we're struggling so hard to fill those part-time positions, we are trying to slowly increase the pay rate to hopefully get some applicants there.
I get you.
You know, we're paying $10 an hour, $11 an hour for some of those positions, but people can go work at a fast food restaurant or Lowe's and make, $12 or $13 an hour to do a lot less labor-intensive work.
I can't
You
believe
know,
we have positions that pay $10 an
run a
hour.
weed eater all day
My
long
word.
for $11?
So will that help you, Jake?
Well, I don't really want to swap out that. I'm trying to
know.
advocate for no
I
cuts.
hate to do that.
It's just a
Cherry pick.
tiny amount. Again, nothing new ever gets off the ground because we're always scrambling to, maintain basic levels. And the thing with a program like this is if you've got one or two people that have the ability to, improve their sidewalk, and their neighbors see that, and maybe they don't have the financial constraints or need the grant, and they have the impetus to improve theirs, and
Yeah.
I mean that spreads, and
Yeah.
you start to see improvement.
Yes.
And
What is the airport facility improvement reserve? Is that just amping up the reserve because of projected project in the future, or is that for a potential project in the next budget year?
You're gonna need a drink after this.
Yeah,
Jason.
no, it's fine. That's part of being a park director, I guess. So the airport facilities reserve is partially not rainy day money, funds for unanticipated repairs to hangars that are 50, 60, 70-year-old hangars. So, major roof leaks, those sorts of things, that we have some funds available to make those. There are also some small improvement projects, so less than $10,000 plugged into that. Without looking at my spreadsheet, I can't tell you exactly what those are, but those are.
Because I saw that you lowered it.
I don't remember without going back all the way through my notes, which
So I didn't know if
projects
that
we
was
took
something
out.
we had some wiggle room in, like we could lower 10,000 there and 5,000 there and 10,000 there and come up with your 20,000 and some of these like reserve.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Is there any more wiggle room where you could squeeze
I
out
mean,
5,000?
We can look at all the reserves a little bit closer. I mean, that is one
Yeah.
of my area that I get concerned with those reserves is that
Yeah.
that funding for, we have an air conditioner unit that goes out,
Yeah.
and it's a $60,000.
Well, I was hoping I guess,
So
is
it-
there
it's a
some
balance.
reserve where we could just click a couple thousand out of each?
I've already done that at least.
No.
Well, I do that every year.
I
and
know,
I've done
that's,
it
yeah,
once
I've
this
seen
year.
that you did pluck already, that's why I was asking.
Why don't we just do it as a tiny experiment for 1 year and see how receptive the public is to it, how popular it is. If it's not popular, if people aren't interested,
Where's the funding coming out of? Is it gonna come out of the general
comes
fund?
out of that ending balance.
Yeah.
That's where it comes out.
I mean,
of.
I guess 20,000, what's the difference between 4.5 and 4.4?
I have heard other communities do things like the resident pays for the materials and then the city provides the labor. But I don't know if we're even equipped to do that. So, but just throwing it out there.
Are we equipped to do that?
The city's been, from my impression, walking in the door here, the city's been very responsive to the evolution of changing needs and desires. And that's evidenced by 2 additional positions that are now under my immediate division. And you're talking somewhere to the tune of 120, 140 grand by the time you throw benefits in, and with really no major impact to the taxpayers, but it was an extra service. And I think it's good that we're having the discussion to see what the evolution is this year in services so that we have an appreciation for that. But it's also good to convey that message to the public that the city is responsive. Additional positions are put on to meet that need. And the majority of the time, that's not really passed through in any immediate apparent way to the taxpayer. Yet it is a service that is enhanced for the public. So it's, I think that's worth knowing and discussing. And
I would like to see the 20,000. I think, okay, 2.5, get us to the 4, or Just put the 20,000 in
I
there.
can
It's
speak
only
real quick.
20,000. I'm not gonna say.
A little bit about the genesis of where this sidewalk idea came
Yeah.
from, the
Okay.
Housing Commission. So, you are aware that there was another partnership for a Healthy Communities grant that Heel Reno County received, Hutch Rec received. And one of the ideas that came out of this was that there would be some targeted sidewalk work in some of our featured neighborhoods. And this idea is a pilot project. This would be funded jointly with city funds. It would be funded with the grant funds, and it would be funded by the community or by the residents themselves. So really, it's three people that are coming together to do this. So it really is a good example of how we can be collaborative and really leverage a lot of different funds to hopefully do a lot more work. The other thing I will say is that I have had discussions with the state, I've had discussions with SCED with our next CDBG application that we are planning on putting in 22, it would be for 23. We are looking at adding a request for some sidewalk funds in for whatever targeted area we do for our next CDBG. McPherson would be the first one in the state that would actually be doing this, and they're kind of the guinea pigs on this, but the state has, it's always been something that is allowed for CDBG, but for some reason nobody in the state has really ever taken advantage of it. So I fully intend, it is something we've heard loud and clear. We've heard from Southwest Bricktown, we've heard from Creekside, we've heard from other communities, and we're not even, unfortunately, scratching the surface of neighborhoods that don't have any sidewalks that have also really wanted to see that as well. So it's a huge thing. It's something that is really supported through a cross section of our community, and so that's kind of where the whole genesis of this conversation came from. So just to kind of give a little bit of context.
Thank you.
Okay, where we at, Jeffrey?
I think
I
from
think
what
we're
I hear,
close.
I'm gonna do a Dave line on here. Nancy, how are you feel about the sidewalks for 20,000?
Let's not put anything formal in place right now. Let's kind of wait and see how things fall out. And we have $20,000 left over at the end of the year. We put it towards sidewalks. Otherwise, reduce that 4175 down to 4155, and there you have $20,000.
Dave line.
Yeah, I would concur with Nancy. I'm certainly
We don't want a
I'm not
majority-
against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we can defer that decision.
Can we get
forward.
somewhat of a, we're meeting again on this, right? Well, I know we have to, but are we gonna have another one of these sessions prior to the August?
If we have a pretty strong consensus tonight, we'll draft this thing and put it back out, communicate it to you all internally, and then there will be one more meeting at the very least. That would be the public hearing. Ideally, if we're all pretty much on the same page, and I think we are, I'm not sure there would be a need for another meeting.
Because I would like, the 2.5 with the raise increase, adjustment to this budget, and the 20,000 for sidewalks. Can we at least get some kind of a commitment?
All that requires is
Those
adjustment
two?
of the year-ending balance. In my,
Just reduce your year-ending
Yeah.
balance by
Accordingly,
20,000.
that's-
Then, I mean, if that's,
when you're
just
talking
do it.
millions.
yeah.
No, I'm saying, would it be okay if they went ahead and drafted that proposal to us when we meet this next?
It's such a minuscule amount in the
Minuscule
grand
amount. It's
overall scheme of
negligible.
things, sure.
I'm gonna go back down. Steve,
Go back, go ahead and do it.
what do you think?
I
Would we
disagree with 2.5, but I would say that we could take it
Mm.
from a budget that Mr. Daveline said and put 20,000.
So there's three of us now. Am I correct? There's three on the council that agree with the 20,000 for sidewalks project?
I think that's what I heard, and that it would.
All right,
that it
I'm
would-
just doing a day one on this again.
but do I
I did
understand-
hear three. Okay, if we could get those two adjustments made and then the preliminary back to us with those
let me speak to the group real quick here.
Okay.
My understanding is that we would do that, but it would come out of the year-ending cash balance.
That's
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I
That's-
think we're all there.
that's what we would do.
All right.
Yep, okay. Thank you, guys.
So without the need for another budget session, are you saying the first opportunity for public comment would be at a hearing on October 1st? Unless people wanted
No,
to?
August.
It has to be between August 20th and September 20th.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And then we would, okay.
So,
Yeah, because of this revenue
Oh, the revenue
neutral
neutral thing,
thing,
yeah.
yeah,
so that,
yeah.
I am curious, you made a comment about, the ARPA committee. I've heard nothing about that. What's going on?
I don't know.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The group still exists. They do still meet. I think Sarah went to one of the meetings. I know I went to one.
But they haven't scheduled public meetings, have they?
It's not that the meetings aren't public. There's a lot of internal dialogue, at least when I was there, as to which agencies would be funded, which programs would be considered. It was very early in the discussion, and it was all speculative on the county and the city being big givers when it came to that. And I'm going to guess that they're probably still figuring that out as to what those priorities are within the community, but also how to engage the community was another
yeah,
piece
so
of that.
I was at the
Oh, I
last
thought they had
meeting,
that figured out.
and
Yeah.
I think right now they're getting a group from KU to facilitate community outreach. And basically, right now, it's just trying to make sure that we have enough voices from each group
Which is good. That's what we want.
to have a meeting with the KU people, so that those people kind of know how to draft, how they're gonna do the community engagement. And then after that piece is done, then I think there's gonna have those open meetings in that community engagement piece.
Okay.
So that's kind of what's going on right now. I think there's gonna be another meeting this month. And I think that's the last of the organizational meetings. And then I think the team from KU is gonna start the public outreach and the open
Okay.
meetings.
Okay.
That makes sense. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not expecting a recommendation until, for quite a while.
Yeah.
No. Doesn't sound like it.
Sure,
Yeah.
Sure.
please do.
I'm Aubrey Abbott Patterson at the Community Foundation, and have been part of those task force meetings. And I would say that we've been very clear not to talk about what the priorities are for this community, but rather to put together a process that's been trying to be inclusive of all voices across the county, and making sure that when we gather input, we're going to be able to hear from a diverse representation of people, all different kinds of diversity and different lived experiences here, so that we can help inform your decisions with the ARPA funds. You said KU, it's K-State.
Oh, K-State,
But
sorry.
university doctoral.
I apologize.
That's okay. Doctoral students who are putting together a process for us. And the last meeting was to talk about their process. We had some input into what they're doing, and they went back to make some changes, and they'll come back to us. I think it's July 16th. And we set that date based on the fact that I believe the Treasury regulations come out
I think you're
on
right.
July 9th. Is that true?
I thought it was mid-month, but I think you're right.
So we
Oh,
tried to
that's
set the
Thursday.
meeting late enough that we would have the Treasury guidelines. So my dates might be off, but, so we'd have those, and we're really gonna look at those to see what the truth is about. Like, I hadn't heard the part about sidewalks. I think that's really, those are the kinds of things we need, because we wanna make sure that when we're asking our county residents for input, we're not setting them up to think we can fund something with this
Right.
money that we can't.
Well, and
Yeah.
hopefully through the
So-
rulemaking process, things like sidewalks will turn out to be allowed.
Yeah, and maybe, and I think that's why we've got to wait and see how those guidelines work out. But I feel like so far it's been a good process. At our last meeting, we made the decision to add a couple of more people to the task force for the purposes of vetting the process, but also making sure that then we can all reach out to our designated affinity groups and make sure we get all the right voices heard in the broader process.
Okay.
So I feel really good about it, and I've appreciated the committee and the stance being that we want to do this quickly, and we want to capitalize on the momentum and the understanding of what the purpose of this money is, that coming out of COVID, we want to give our community a jump start. but also that we don't want to rush it so fast that we don't do anything that's
Mhm.
helpful to you as the decision
Yeah.
makers. So I think we're on a good trajectory to come back to you end of August into September, somewhere in there.
Oh, fantastic.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, at this point, I think we settled everything we wanted to settle, whether it be good or bad. Is there anything else we need to do, Mr. Jeffrey?
You guys have done well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and seeing this. So, from that, I think we will adjourn.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
I actually usually don't have to go.